He left a prestigious law career, moved to Mexico, and then became a party clown? Hi, everyone. I'm Raymond Lee, the host of Clocking Out. Today's guest is Robert Markowitz. Robert has a pretty interesting story with many twists and dramatic turns. Early on, he was raised outside New York City from immigrant parents who had big aspirations for Robert. The family pressures were felt early on, and his dreams of being a center fielder for the New York Yankees would not be a reality. So, to please his parents, he went off to Duke Law School to be a lawyer. But his career as a defense attorney was not all what he expected it to be. So this ultimately led to some pretty radical changes. This conversation left me wanting to meet Robert in person, which we ended up booking at the end of our conversation. I believe that you're going to fall in love with Robert just as I did. So without further ado, please enjoy Robert Markowitz and his Clocking Out story. Hey, Robert, welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Raymond. Great to be here.
I am just so giddy about our conversation today. In preparation for the podcast, I did a little research about your background, about your recent book, and there was something interesting in an article that I read that really struck me, was that you didn't get a lot of support from your family when it came to you clocking out. And I don't want to jump to the conclusion here, but oftentimes when I'm interviewing people and they're really wanting to make a change or they're wanting to follow their dream, usually you get family support. Sometimes it's like, are you crazy? But in your particular case, your clocking out journey was so radical that you had to sort of navigate the change of that, but you also had to navigate some of the pressures you were feeling from your family with regards to why you were doing what you were doing. And so I can only connect with that experience and look forward to kind of digging into that a little bit more here today.
Yeah, well, they had, Raymond, they had a point in that, I was leaving a profession where I had prepared for it for a long time. I had gone to Duke Law School. I'd, done all sorts of internships, and it'd take me 10 years basically to prepare to become the kind of criminal lawyer that I was. And I was leaving that to do something that most people thought you could not even make a living at, which was basically appearing at schools and libraries with a guitar to sing to 2-year-olds. So, you can understand the pushback when I'm like, yeah, I've spent 10 years training to be a criminal lawyer, but what I really want to do is go sing to 2-year-olds. So yeah, it was understandable, the pushback.
Yeah, no, that's such a fair point. And your story is incredibly inspiring for people who have that dream. And I think radical is probably appropriate when you think about, sort of where the career path you were in and the career path that you ended up. I'm just so excited about the journey. And so, Robert, our listeners love a good origin story. Let's start with, tell us where you're from. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Westchester County, which is a suburb of New York City. It's where you might have heard places like Scarsdale or White Plains. Mm-hmm. It's in that vicinity. And, my parents were the children of immigrants. And there had been sort of they'd been climbing the ladder. Like my grandfather was a baker who worked 12 hours a day in walk-in ovens. And then my dad, because he got the GI Bill of Rights from World War II, he became a teacher. And then it was my job to even go further and become a lawyer. So it's sort of like the immigrant journey where every tier is supposed to attain another rung on the ladder of the American dream. And, that was my job at that time.
That's interesting. So you had the pressure of achievement early on from your parents, and you ultimately chose a career. What did your mom do for a living?
She was also a teacher. Both my parents were public school teachers in Westchester County.
What was it like growing up there? What was your most memorable moment?
Well, I was born in 1957, okay? And that I think that continues to be the biggest birth year ever in the United States. So honestly, there were kids on every block. And in those days, my parents had grown up in the Bronx. So they thought Mamaroneck, which is the town I grew up in, was just, totally safe. And they were very lax. Like, we came home from school and just went our way and played with all the kids and played football, baseball. And we came home for dinner. And nobody was asking where we were. Nobody was paying much attention to what we did. It was that sort of a childhood.
When you were young, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I was I didn't know much when I was young. And it took me until maybe age 16 to realize I wasn't going to play center field for the New York Yankees. It took me a while. Most kids would have figured that out by the time they were 9, but it took me until about 16. I did play high school baseball, but I didn't really understand. So yeah, I wasn't thinking about being a lawyer when I grew up, and I was much more interested in creative arts and sports. But I don't know. I felt like I needed to. I guess I was swayed by my parents. And also, Raymond, the truth is, I wanted to be important. It was important to me at that time to be somebody who would garner tremendous respect. And, that was important to me. So I thought, oh, man, I'm going to be a lawyer. Nobody's going to, look down on that. So there was ego involved. And it took me some humiliating events in my life to realize that ego was not really the way to go,
So where did that come from? I just wonder, you said you wanted to be a center fielder for the New York Yankees up until 16. You had this kind of influence of your dad and your grandfather and your family to go to college and to have this career. When was the moment when you really honed in on law? And what was it about that you felt like this would give you the sort of status that you were looking for?
Yeah, I think that if I want to tell the truth here, Raymond, I wasn't really courageous as a young guy. If I had been courageous, I would have gone for a career in the arts probably immediately once I figured out that I wasn't going to be the center fielder for the New York Yankees. But I wasn't brave enough to do that. I did succumb to societal pressure. I did succumb to parental pressure. If I had been braver, I would have probably done what I wanted to do right off the bat. But I didn't have that kind of courage. So I thought that this was a reasonable way to go to become a lawyer. I got into Duke Law School and I thought, whoa, that means I'm an important guy. So it was like that. I was superficial. I think it's fair to say that in those days I was superficial and I wanted to be respected by other people.
That is, I appreciate your vulnerability. That story is so relatable, I feel like, to so many people, especially as a young kid growing up. You're looking for that identity and really what you're ultimately going to do. And I feel like there's so many people who pick careers because of sort of that desire to want to be important, the desire to want to find a career that people are going to look to you and say, wow, Robert made it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I remember when I graduated from Duke, I couldn't talk to a girl for 3 minutes without slipping into the conversation. I just graduated from Duke Law. It was like, it was that kind of thing. But I think eventually that catches up with you. At least it caught up with me.
So, Robert, tell me about your first job.
I have a particular memory of a job that I had, my first actual lawyer job. And the memory is that I was in this office, I had the work in front of me, and suddenly I popped out of the office outside to make a call to my girlfriend. And what I said to my girlfriend was, I'm not sure I can handle this 9 hour a day being in an office deal. And I had tremendous fear about being in an office and not being able to basically leave for, say, 9 hours. And that's true. I mean, some people are not office people. Some people don't really do well with going into the same environment every day, being kind of cooped up that way. And I think I was definitely one of those people, but I had always fought that. And I figured I could, through sheer willpower, defeat that.
Wow. So you graduated from Duke Law
Yeah.
School. You passed
Yeah.
the bar. You start practicing as an attorney. You're a defense attorney, essentially. We're going into an office, working in an office 8 hours, 9 hours a day. And it was almost immediate where you started to feel like this sort of disconnect from this identity as an attorney. And you started to have this uncomfortable feeling like, wow, this is not really the career that I envisioned. And so you had this conversation with your girlfriend. What was the outcome of that? You obviously didn't clock out right away.
No, I didn't. What happened was the reason that job did not last very long. And the reason that I was given is that the lawyer got a $9 million personal injury case that he needed he needed somebody who could specialize in that because he had been a DA and he wasn't really, that wasn't his field. So he needed to fire me and actually hire somebody who specialized in that because he had gotten this huge personal injury case. So I went into business for myself immediately after that. It did work. I did okay.
Wow. So that's interesting. You decided working for a firm under their terms and their control just wasn't going to be in the cards. So you said to yourself, if I am going to make this career a thing, I need to work for myself. How, at an early age, how old were you when you made this decision?
I think I was already 30 because it had taken me a while actually to pass the California bar. There was one they don't like people coming into California and taking the bar. So there was one bar that only 28% of the people passed, which is unbelievable. So I failed a couple of bars before I passed it. So I was already, and I had taken 1 year off of law school too, to try to again become like a singer-songwriter. I had taken a year off. So yeah, I was already 30 by that time.
Wow. So your 20s was really you kind of navigating this identity of figuring out, am I going to lean into this real passion that I have of being a musician, or am I going to grind through this career of being an attorney, which is ultimately what probably everyone on the outside wanted you to be? I bet it was a real struggle.
It was a real struggle. I think a time when I had a turning point where I realized that I was really on the wrong path is I did my first criminal trial. And I called my mother and I told her, Mom, I've done my first criminal trial. Let me tell you about it. And I remember her reply was, I really would have preferred you become a corporate lawyer. And I thought, boy, am I a jerk. If I did this for my mother, which it was only partly true, but if I did this partly for my mother, she doesn't really care. you know, she doesn't care. It's like that old lyric, if you can't please everyone, you got to please yourself, which is an old song by Ricky Nelson.
Wow. Were you feeling defeated at that point?
It was more that I realized that there was no there. Like what my mother actually wanted was not substantial. It really made no sense. I had gone through all of this. I had completed this first criminal trial, and that wasn't what she wanted or what pleased her. And I realized it's impossible to please other people. You can't you can't live like that. You can't please other people. They're unpleasable.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. What's coming to mind is a sort of the struggle between the musician and being an attorney. And it's like the attorney side is you're doing all the things to please various people, but inside at the core, you're not pleasing yourself. And then you have this sort of itch of wanting to be this musician. And that's really knowing at the bottom of your heart that that's really what's going to please Robert, is playing a guitar, entertaining people. And it's not going to be it's not going to please other people. Like it's going to fill your soul and fill your heart, but it's sort of this internal struggle. And I wonder, how long did you practice law before you realized, like, I need to do something different for me?
I practiced it for 4 years, and then I left, and I went to Mexico. And I lived in Mexico for 2 years. Yeah, wow. I just took whatever money I had made and I went to Mexico. I figured, what I was figuring was, look, I was miserable, really like completely depressed and not happy. And I had been pretty happy as a kid, basically happy. And I knew that it was possible. So I figured, let's just get out of here, see what happens.
Well, so you're in California, you have your own consultancy, your own business, you're a defense attorney, you're taking on cases, and you just walked away from it.
Yeah, I just walked away from it. That's right. That's basically the truth.
Did you have a conversation with your parents? Were you looking for approval at that point? Or how did you sort of communicate to your family, your friends, that you were going to Mexico with a few bucks in your pocket to figure out, like, what's next?
That's exactly right. My dad was already dead by that time. And my father had a lot of influence on me. And my mother would sort of put him up. She knew that he was more influential. So she'd sort of say, well, you got to say this to him. So he was out of the picture. And so did I tell my mother I was going? Yes. But a funny story is that I left, and then I was on the road for 10 days with my little Nissan Sentra. That's what I was driving then. And I rolled into Mexico, and I basically didn't communicate with my mother for 10 days. And I was in a place called San Miguel de Allende, which is in the state of Guanajuato in the mountains, 6,000 feet high. And somebody comes up to me, another American, and says, I saw you on TV last night. Apparently, my mom had put out an ad on Mexican TV that I was missing. Oh, I was pissed off at her, but when I cooled down, I saw, okay, communicate with mom.
Oh my goodness. You're like her baby.
I guess so. And, look, she means well. Everybody has a different perspective, I think she meant well. She didn't want her boy to go bad. And In her opinion, I was going bad.
So when you're in Mexico, you're in the mountains, you're probably doing a lot of soul searching and reflecting. What was going through your mind? Like, I'm curious if you felt any regret, and were you thinking about the work as an attorney and what you gave up? And was there a moment when you felt like, this is crazy, I need to do what the rest of society is doing? I have this amazing career ahead of me, this amazing degree. Was there any pull back?
I had been going to therapy before I left as a lawyer, when I was a lawyer. And I remember my therapist, who I loved, great therapist. I remember my therapist said, you're gonna miss being a lawyer. You're gonna miss your clients. I can tell you honestly, Raymond, I never missed my clients. I never missed it ever. That's
a sign.
Yeah.
Good for you that you weren't swayed by that influence and that feedback.
Yeah, and on the other side, I can tell you honestly that I've been playing in front of children's audiences for 30 years. And I almost never, I'd say really never, I never get in front of an audience where I'm not happy about it. It's never gotten really old for me. I'm in front of an audience, I'm happy to be there, happy to play. And that's weird. It's been 30 years.
So how long were you in Mexico before you really sort of figured out, like, what's going to be the next thing for Robert?
2 years. I lived in Mexico for 2 years. And what I ultimately realized is, first it was great because you're just out of the whole structure where you're supposed to be somebody and you're supposed to, nobody gives a crap about you in Mexico. They don't care what you're doing. But then eventually I realized that it's not that great just to be this peripheral person in a society that basically doesn't fit into the society. And, it's really hiding. I realized that I was hiding and that I had to basically come back to the United States and figure out what was next.
Wow. So it took you 2 years in Mexico to realize that you were leaving the identity as an attorney and you were going to go down this new path of discovery of your new identity and what that identity was going to look like. And what was the first sort of connection that you had? What was that first sort of job? And when you moved back to the United States, what was it that you connected with in terms of what you were going to do and be?
Okay, so 37 years old by this time. I think I was about that. And I'm living at my mother's house. And pretty much every friend, with the exception of maybe one or two that I've ever had in my life, has sort of abandoned me as like, this guy is nuts and let's just skip him. And I'm depressed. And I'm looking at the New York Times. Back then, you'd have to read the New York Times, like the paper. And I'm looking at the want ads, and it's, office job after office job. I come to this one want ad, which is absurd. It's like, we'll train you to be a party clown, which, lends itself to the name of my book, Clown Shoes. But we'll train you to be a party clown. One night, we'll give you the kit, and then we'll book you shows. $25 a show. Even in that time, that was a very small amount of money. But by that time, I was so blocked off. I was feeling very little. And somehow that penetrated, and I thought, whoa, I can feel something about that. That excites me. I want to be a party clown. How strange as that is. So I answered the ad. I went to the class. I got the kit, $59. They called me. I went to a place called Ground Round that doesn't exist anymore. It used to be a chain. And I show up. I'm Bobo the Clown. I do my thing with the tricks they gave me and whatever. Made up my own spiel. At the end, the kid, who was 7 years old, says, "Bobo, I love you." And I remember just sitting there in my car afterwards with my head against the steering wheel. And I was feeling a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. I was actually happy, which had eluded me for years. I was happy. And so that was the beginning of, eventually I figured out, might as well play guitar for kids rather than be a clown. And it evolved that way because I knew how to play guitar.
Wow. So it sounds like you quickly connected with this identity, this Bobo the Clown. And
Well, it was the funny thing, Raymond, is it's totally humiliating. I mean, being a clown is a pretty humiliating thing. I had been a lawyer where, the judge had summoned me into chambers and we were discussing the fate of various people who were out in the gallery. And all of a sudden, I'm basically hired help, dressed in, facial makeup and big shoes. It's totally humiliating, but to my heart, it was happy.
right. Well, you connected with this one child, this one kid, and you found meaning and value. Like this kid loved you, and it was almost like the first time that you really felt accepted. As crazy as it is, you are dressed in this clown shoe outfit. You're performing for these kids. You are an entertainer at heart. And you, at an early age, I believe, you are looking for acceptance through being an entertainer. And you wanted people to love how you made them laugh, how you showed up. And this job of, being a clown gave you the opportunity to entertain in front of an audience. And the fact that this kid, this is 30, 40 years later, you remember that. That was the first time someone legit, genuinely said, I love you. And when they said it, they meant every ounce of it.
Yeah. It is that. I do love being in front of an audience. And, there are higher things. But I think with your profession, your temperament is very important. I had the intellectual ability to be a lawyer. I could do it, but I didn't have the temperament. Some people are very happy being lawyers because they have the temperament, but I didn't, and I had to face that.
That's some deep work to realize that, some real self-awareness for you to realize that, and then also be able to pivot. So how long did you work for the clown, and then how did that sort of evolve into being the children's music?
Just as a little side note, my wife made a pretty strong change in her career from being like a middle management pharmaceutical company person to becoming a psychotherapist, but she did it so smoothly. I was married to her when she did it, and she planned it, she executed it. It was all very smooth. She made a living the whole time, one way or the other. Mine was very messy, Raymond. Everything was messy. So to answer your question, I did about 7 or 8 clown gigs, and then I figured, why don't I be a performer in front of children with my guitar? I remember for a period of about 7 months, I moved to New York City. I took somebody's sublet for 7 months, and I called, I don't know, maybe 90 venues like nursery schools and other places like that. Nobody wanted to hire me. Absolutely nobody. So at the beginning, it was difficult. And, I do have a sort of metaphysical idea about this, which is when you make a drastic change like this, I don't know if it's exactly this way, but the way I like to put it is the universe wants to know if you're actually serious or if you're just messing around. So initially, you get a lot of doors shut in your face. And the way I see that is the universe isn't convinced you're serious. But eventually, if you're serious and if you hang in there, doors start to open because metaphysically, they realize, whatever it is out there realizes that you're really going to do this, and you're not just in it, well, maybe it will work, maybe it won't. You're in it, period. You're in it. You're in it whether you make $13,000 a year or whether you make $150,000 a year. You're going to do it, and it's not a qualified thing. And then I think doors start to open. You get better too, of course.
Wow. Well, that's inspiring, Robert. It's so relatable. I was recently interviewing a guest, and she said it's up to 3 years. It's not necessarily 3 years, but I feel like there's a self-fulfilling prophecy in there. There's energy that you're putting into it. There's momentum. And in this particular case, I feel like the buildup where this is what you want to do. And if it was that easy where opportunities and doors open right away, I think people would ultimately just pick things and have the success. But the reality is it can take up to 3 years. It could take 5 years. But if you put enough energy into it, the universe does return with results. And what's interesting is you never know what those results are going to be when you start, like what those doors are going to be, which makes it fun when you look back or I should say it makes it rewarding when you look back because, it's never a linear path. The pathway to get there is oftentimes very rough and hard, but it's also what makes it the most rewarding.
Yeah. Well, I agree with all of that. And, then eventually you reach a place where I am now, where I don't really have to seek gigs too strenuously. I mean, maybe I'll make a call here or there, but mostly people are coming to me. I have regular gigs. I have, there's been something that's built up over years and years, and I just show up and I do my thing, So, and now I have other projects that where my, that I'm inspired, like Out of Clown Shoes, the book. I've written a musical play. Now this is for adults, and we've been performing it in various places, me and 2 other actors. So, I continue. They say follow your bliss. Your bliss might change. I still love doing the kids shows, but it's not really where my bliss is right now. I love it, but where my real fire is now with this musical. I call it Clown Shoes, the musical. It runs about an hour, and we've played it recently in front of 60 people in Richfield, Connecticut, and people love it. So, your bliss might change, but you keep on following it. I
love that. So tell me about Clown Shoes, the book. What was the origin of that?
Well, boy, it went through a lot of stages too. First, I've always been interested in writing, and I was writing about something different. And I went to this woman who gave classes in New York City. And I live like an hour at least from New York City. And at rush hour, it's like 2 hours. But I went to her classes, which were in Greenwich Village, in her apartment. And I remember the first class. For some reason, I was terrified. There were about 30 people in her large living room. And she goes around to each person and she talks to me for a few seconds. And she says, "You should write about your career transition. That's what you should write about." And I did. And we went through a bunch of editing. I was writing an article of about 900 words at first. And the New York Times published it that was like 2017 or something. So that article that was published in the New York Times. It was a personal essay. Started it. I had about 500 reader comments to it. It obviously was interesting to people. Some people were like, "You fool, how'd you leave being a lawyer? And that was really stupid." I mean, and other people were like, "Oh, I've been wanting to do that all my life." So it was like that. And then I thought, okay, it's interesting enough to write about. And at some point, it went from memoir to fiction because I figured that I could dramatize it better if I had the leeway of writing fiction instead of strictly what happened. So that was basically the path.
And where did the shoes come in? Like, I get the fact that you became a party clown. What's the meaning of the shoes?
Well, in the book, there's a scene where I'm with my mother. The book is fiction, but there's a lot of truth in it. I'm with my mother, and she says, she says something like, being a clown, that's totally humiliating. I mean, how could you possibly do that? And I said, well, I've already bought the shoes. So that's where it came in.
Wow. You bought the Bobo
Yes.
shoes. That's pretty cool. So Robert, can you share an example of how you dramatized the story beyond you clocking out of, without giving it away? I personally bought the book, and I'm looking forward to reading it, and I'll promote it as well. But we know your story of leaving law altogether and becoming a musician, an entertainer, a clown. Can you share an example of how you dramatized
absolutely.
it?
I mean, I'll give you one quick example, which is in writing a novel, it's very important. Structure is very important because people expect, even though they don't know it, they expect certain things structurally to happen. So was it enough in a novel to say, well, I was disillusioned with the law, it wasn't really my thing? No, that's not gripping enough. So in the book, the inciting incident is that he has a client who is accused of child abuse, and then after he acquits her, which all happens off the page, after he acquits her, she actually commits child abuse again, and the boy is killed. So the inciting incident for him to leave the law, and there's no gory stuff, by the way. This is all off the page. But the inciting incident for him to leave the law is that he feels responsible in various ways, which you'll find out, for the death of that boy. And in a way, that's symbolic because I felt that law was basically killing the imaginative child in me. But on the page, he feels responsible for the death of a boy in the world. So again, if I told the reader, well, law is killing the imaginative child in me, the reader's like, maybe I don't want to read this book. Who cares? It's killing the imaginative child in you. But if you externalize it, and and an actual boy died because, and you could have done something to save that boy, then that will pull the reader in. That's the inciting incident. So it's things like that where fiction is a better medium to convey the same feelings I had, but with different events.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. It's now drawing me even more interested in checking it out. So I'm looking forward to reading it. Robert, I want to share a quote that was mentioned in an article that featured clown shoes, and it's related to change. And it says, when faced with unhappiness, change is required, but it can't just be external. It must be internal as well. And I guess I'm wondering your advice for people who are in a similar situation as you, where they know they need to make a change. They're not feeling fulfilled. And it is so clear that you had to do some hard work internal in order to sort of live your best life. It wasn't a matter of just choosing some external decision points that you would ultimately try to pursue. Like, there was a lot of internal work. And I wonder, Like, how do you start with that work?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I want to say, Raymond, is that I don't think that everybody needs to do a drastic career change. I obviously did, but I do think that, being present in the moment, like I just listened to a podcast this morning where somebody said, Zen is doing one thing at a time. If you can be present in whatever work you're doing, you're going to be happier. The mind is always looking towards the future. Like, oh, if I could just get finished with this podcast, then I can do this other thing. That's what the mind does. It doesn't ever enjoy the experience of the podcast and say, wow, this is where I am right now. Isn't this amazing? Which it is. But it's always jumping ahead. So I do think that there are ways of being happier or being more present in whatever you're doing. But some people have to change their profession. And, I guess I was one of those.
There's so many things that you said there that I feel like are life lessons. One is you removed yourself from the work and you went to Mexico for 2 years. And from my perspective, I feel like what that does is it puts you in a place where you have to be comfortable with you.
Yeah, that's true.
And you have to connect with you and be present with you before you can ultimately do the external things that you want to do. And so I think starting with accepting you first before that boy accepts you as the clown is so important. And the fact that you did do that work in Mexico, I feel like is important. And some people, they go away for 2 weeks or they become present with themselves. And it really starts with you accepting yourself first. And so I appreciate you sharing those insights. Anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, what you just said is right on. I mean, I didn't even realize that until you said it. But yeah, I had a sort of spiritual awakening in Mexico, and I won't go into the details, but yes. And it was very uncomfortable being with myself for a lot of the time there. So yes, I relate to all of those things.
Well, Robert, I have to tell you, this conversation absolutely exceeded my expectation. I really, really enjoyed getting to know you more. There's a few things that I want to do. One is you're 2 hours from me. I've been to White Plains.
Oh, really?
I've been to that part of the world. I live in Philadelphia, and I want to see the musical. I want to see the clown shoes. I will absolutely be reaching out to get information on that.
The next time we're going to put it on will be October 7th, 6 p.m., Rye Public Library, which Rye is another town that's very close to White Plains.
And that's RYE?
Yeah. So 6 p.m., October 7th at Rye Library in their community room. We're going to be staging our next performance of it.
That's great. Is that a Saturday night
no,
or Friday night?
Unfortunately, it isn't. It's I think it's a Tuesday night. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a Tuesday night at 6 p.m. So that may not be, but there's all sorts of things in the works. So there should be more information soon.
That's great. Well, Robert, I'm going to share all your information in our show notes. And for those who are interested in checking out Clown Shoes, the musical, October 7th, it's likely a Tuesday at 6 p.m. at Rye Library outside New York City. Definitely encourage you to check it out. And I did, yeah, of course. And I just purchased Clown Shoes. I'm looking forward to reading it and sharing it with my friends. Really grateful for your time here today. This has been terrific. Really enjoy getting to know you more and your story. Appreciate you sharing your story.
I loved your questions, and I enjoyed this experience, so thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Until next time.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. It's Raymond again here. I want to take a moment to say a special thanks to our sponsor, Career Minds. They're a global provider of career transition and career development solutions. And if you'd like to hear more on Clocking Out, we'd love for you to take a second and click follow of your favorite podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a rating or review. It really helps new listeners find the show. You can also watch the full episode on YouTube. Just search Clocking Out with Raymond Lee and hit subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to check out our episode polls or just drop us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Finally, if you or someone you know has a story to share about navigating change, taking a risk, or rethinking your career, we want to hear from you. Head to the link in our show notes and fill out the form to be considered for a future episode. Until next time, remember, if you're just sitting there thinking that you're stuck or you're unsure of your career or future and you think it's time for a change, I would encourage yourself to ask these 3 questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? Am I doing the things that genuinely matter to me most? Am I creating value for myself and for others? Until next time.